Your quiz is on 1.5 and it's all 3 sections of 1.5. So 1.5 part 1, 1.5 part 2, and 1.5 part 3. Your review covers everything that's on your quiz. So your review is a good thing to look at to prepare yourself for your quiz. Your first questions tell you to simplify each expression and write your answer in simplest A plus BI form. Your questions like this tomorrow will also tell you to write your answer in A plus BI form. So if your answer is not given in A plus BI form, you will get points taken off for those questions. So for number 1, you have 7 plus 19i minus 12i plus 18. You're going to first distribute that negative into your second set of parentheses. So that'll give you 7 plus 19i minus 12i minus 18. We are combining like terms from here, and we're combining the real parts and then the imaginary parts. So your real parts are the 7 and the negative 18, which leave you with negative 11. And then your imaginary parts are the 19i and the negative 12i, which leave you with positive 7i. So your answer for this one is just negative 11 plus 7i. For number 2, you have negative 8 minus 13i plus 4i times 22i minus 8. That 4i is going to distribute into the second set of parentheses, and that's going to leave you with negative 8 minus 13i plus 88i squared minus 32i. The I squared turns into what? And negative 1 times a positive 88 turns it into a negative 88. So you now have negative 8 minus 88, which are your real parts. So that'll give you negative 96. And then your negative 13i combines with your negative 32i, which gives you negative 45i. For number 3, you have negative 4 times 6 minus 7i plus 2 times 5 plus I. We're going to distribute that negative 4 into the first set of parentheses and that 2 into the second set of parentheses. So it's going to give us negative 24 plus 28i plus 10 plus 2i. Your real parts are the negative 24 and the positive 10, which leave you with negative 14. Your imaginary parts are the 28i plus 2i, which leaves you with 30i. For number 4, you have negative 7 times 5 plus 3i minus 3 times 10 minus 3i. So we're going to distribute that negative 7 in first. So negative 7 times 5 is negative 35. Negative 7 times 3i is negative 21i. Next, we'll distribute the negative 3 in to the 10 minus 3i. So negative 3 times 10 is negative 30. And negative 3 times negative 3i is positive 9i. So from here, combine your like terms. You got negative 35 minus 30, which gives you negative 65. And negative 21i plus 9i, which gives you negative 12i. For number 5, we have negative 3 plus 7i times 8 minus 5i. For this one, we're going to FOIL. So we're going to start by multiplying that negative 3 into the second set of parentheses. So negative 3 times 8 is negative 24. Your negative 3 times negative 5i is positive 15i. Now you'll multiply the 7i into the second set of parentheses. So 7i times 8 is 56i. And then 7i, bless you, times negative 5i is negative 35i squared. That I squared is negative 1, so it turns the negative 35 into a positive 35. You then have like terms with the negative 24 and the 35, which leaves you with 11. That 15i and 56i will combine to give you a positive 71i. So 11 plus 71i is your answer. For number 6, we have negative 4 plus 5i times negative 9 minus 7i. So we're going to do the same thing in FOIL. So we got that negative 4 times negative 9, which gives us 36. Then the negative 4 times negative 7i is positive 28i. Next is the 5i times negative 9, which is negative 45i. And 5i times negative 7i, which is negative 35i squared. Once again, that I squared turns into negative 1, so it turns that negative 35 into a positive 35. You're going to add your 36 and 35, which gives you 71. Then you have your 28i minus 45i, which is going to leave you with negative 17i. For your next questions, you have these fractions where you have to rationalize your denominator. So you're dividing, but in order to do this, you are ending without an I in the denominator. So you're rationalizing those denominators practically. So for number 7, we have 5 plus 9i over 7 minus 2i. My first thing to do with these, which should be your first thing also, is to put parentheses around your numerator and your denominator. Your second thing, you have to find the conjugate from your denominator. So remember, keep the two terms, but change the sign in between them. The conjugate of 7 minus 2i is 7 plus 2i. So we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by that 7 plus 2i. Up top, you have 5 plus 9i times 7 plus 2i. So we're just going to FOIL that out from here. The 5 times 7 is 35. 5 times 2i is 10i. 9i times 7 is 63i. The 9i times 2i is 18i squared. Same thing with the bottom. You have two binomials that are multiplied together, so we'll FOIL them out. 7 times 7 is 49. The 7 times 2i is 14i. Negative 2i times 7 is going to give us a negative 14i. And negative 2i times 2i is a negative 4i squared. Up top and on bottom, you have that I squared, which turns into negative 1. So it changes the sign in front of the number. So that positive 18I squared turns into negative 18, and that negative 4I squared turns into positive 4. From here, combine your like terms on both the top and the bottom. Your bottom has the 14I minus 14I, which are opposites, so they cancel each other out. So you can do that first if you'd like to. Up top, your 35 and your negative 18 are going to combine together. Your 5 turns into 15. 15 minus 8 is 7. The 3 would have turned into 2, so 2 minus 1 is 7. So that's 17. You then have 10i plus 63i, which is 73i. On the bottom, you have the 49 plus 4, which is 53. You do not have a like term between the 17, the 73, and the 53. You know that because 17 is a prime number. If you were able to divide 73 by 17 and 53 by 17, you would be able to simplify, but you can't, so that is your answer. If you're ending these questions and you have an I in your denominator, you're doing something wrong. So keep that in mind. For number 8, you're given 6 plus I over 7 minus 4i. I'm going to put parentheses around our numerator first, and then we'll put parentheses around our denominator. The conjugate of our denominator is 7 plus 4i. So we're going to multiply the bottom and the top by 7 plus 4i. Up top, your 6 times 7, it gives you 42. The 6 times 4i is 28i. I times 7 is 7i. And I times 4i is 4i squared. On the bottom, 7 times 7 is 49. 7 times 4i is 28i. Negative 4i times 7 is negative 28i. And negative 4i times 4i is negative 16i squared. From here, yeah, what did I do? 28, this, thank you. Oh, that should be still squared. Let's do this. This is 24. Sorry, guys. Thank you. All right, so that's 42 plus 24i plus 7i plus 4i squared all over 49 plus 28i minus 28i minus 16i squared. The I squared changes the sign in front of the numbers, so that 4i squared turns into negative 4. The negative 16i squared turns into positive 16. From here, your 28i and your negative 28i are opposites, so they cancel each other out, and then you're just left with combining like terms. So up top, you have 42 minus 4, which is 38. Then 24i plus 7i, which gives us 31i. And then you on the bottom have 49 plus 16. Your 9 and 16 is 15. You carry the 1, so 4 and 2 give you 65 on the bottom. Your 38, 31i, and your 65 do not share a common factor other than 1. You know that because 31 is a prime number, and it doesn't go into 38 or 65 evenly. So that is your answer. For number 9, you have negative 4 times the square root of negative 75 plus 6 times the square root of negative 20 minus the square root of negative 48 plus the square root of negative 80. I would first take those negatives out of those radicals before you do anything else. Remember, the square root of negative 1 is I. So that negative 4 times the square root of negative 75 turns into negative 4i times the square root of 75. The 6 times the square root of negative 20 turns into 6i times the square root of 20. Then that opposite of the square root of negative 48 turns into negative I times the square root of 48. And the square root of negative 80 turns into plus I square root 80. From here, you have to simplify all of those radicals. The biggest problem that you're going to have tomorrow is to remember to multiply whatever the radical simplifies by with the number that's in front. So make sure that that term that's in front gets multiplied by whatever that radical simplifies to. So for that negative 4i square root 75, that 75 is 3 and 25, while 25 is 5 and 5. Those 5s pair up, that 3 is left over, so that's going to lead you to have the negative 4i times 5 square root 3. For the 6i times the square root of 20, that square root of 20 is 4 and 5. The 4 is 2 and 2. Your 2's pair up, your 5 stays under, so that becomes 6i times the square root, or sorry, times 2, where are we? Square root 5. Then with the negative I times the square root of 48, that 48 is 4 and 12. 12 is 4 and 3. Your 4's pair up, your 3 stays under, so that's negative I times 4 square root 3. Then your I square root 80, your 80 is 4 and 20. 20 is 4 and 5. Those 4's pair up, so that's going to give you I times 4 square root 5. Your next job from here is to multiply what you have. So that negative 4i times 5 square root 3 is going to give you negative 20i square root 3. Your 6i times 2 square root 5 is going to leave you with 12i square root 5. Then that negative I times 4 square root 3 is going to give you negative 4i square root 3. And lastly, that I times 4 square root 5 is 4i square root 5. You are going to combine like terms from there. The negative 20i square root 3 is a like term to the negative 4i square root 3. So that gives you negative 24i square root 3. Lastly, the 12i square root 5 and the 4i square root 5 are like terms. So that leaves you with 16i square root 5. So your answer for this one is just the 24i square root 3 plus 16i square root 5. For the rest of your questions, you are solving each of these equations and writing your answer in simplest form. For number 10, you have 4x squared plus 6 is equal to 3x. You need all of your terms on the same side. So we're going to move that 3x over first by subtracting it from both sides. That's going to leave you with 4x squared plus 3x, or sorry, minus 3x plus 6 is equal to 0. You cannot factor this, so you're going to use your quadratic formula. Your a is 4, your b is -3, and your c is 6. So this is going to leave you with x is equal to the opposite of -3, plus or minus the square root of -3 squared, minus 4 times 4 times 6, all over 2 times 4. The opposite of -3 is +3. The 3 squared is 9. You have -4 times -4, which is 16. So -16 times 6 is what you'll do, which you have 36 and then 9. So that's going to be giving you a -96. And this is all over 8. So from here, this simplifies to give you 3 plus or minus the square root of a -87 all over 8. Your -87 underneath that radical becomes I square root 87. That 87 does simplify. 3 goes into it evenly. It goes in 29 times. 3 and 29 are both prime numbers, so you cannot break that 87 down any further. So your answer for this one is going to be x is equal to 3 plus or minus I square root 87 all over 8. For number 11, you have x minus 3 is equal to 7x squared. If it was me, I like my a to be positive, so I would move my x over by subtracting it from both sides, and I'd move my 3 over by adding it to both sides. So that would give us 7x squared minus x plus 3 is equal to 0. Again, can't factor it, so identify your a, which is 7, your b, which is -1, and your c, which is 3. Use those 3 terms, plug it into your quadratic formula. You have x is equal to the opposite of -1, plus or minus the square root of -1 squared, minus 4 times 7 times 3. And that's all over 2 times 7. The opposite of -1 is +1, plus or minus the square root of -1 squared is 1. The -4 times 7 is 28. You're multiplying that 28 by 3. The 8 and 3 is 24. 3 and 2 plus 2 is 8, so that's -84. And this is all over 2 times 7, which is 14. Underneath your radical, you have 1 minus 84, which is -83. So x is equal to 1 plus or minus the square root of -83 all over 14. To simplify that square root, the negative has to come out, so you're going to turn it into a positive and pull an I, put it in front. So that's going to give you x is equal to 1 plus or minus I square root 83 all over 14 for your answer. If we move to our next examples, for number 12, you have x squared plus 49 is equal to 0. You got an x squared and you got a constant. So that constant can move over, and then you can just take the square root of both sides. It's going to be the easiest way to solve this. So if we use that method, we can just subtract the 49 over for this one. And that would give you x squared is equal to -49. And then you'll take the square root of both sides. What goes in front of your answer when you take the square root of both sides? The positive and the negative, so the plus or minus. That negative is underneath the square root, so you're going to include I in your answer, and the square root of 49 is 7. So x is equal to plus or minus 7i for this one. For number 13, you have 5x squared plus 45 is equal to 0. This one's similar to number 12. You just have a number in front of the x squared now. So move your 45 over first, subtract it from both sides. This leaves you with 5x squared is equal to -45. Then you're just dividing each side by 5 to get x squared is equal to -9. You want x, not x squared, so take the square root of both sides, and you're left with x is equal to plus or minus 3i. For number 14, we're going to work with negative 3x squared plus 7x minus 8 is equal to 0. You don't have to move anything over for this one, and you still can't factor it. So we're going to identify a to be negative 3, b is 7, and c is negative 8. So using our quadratic formula, we're going to have x is equal to the opposite of 7, which is negative 7, plus or minus the square root of 7 squared, minus 4 times negative 3 times negative 8, all over 2 times negative 3. From here, we're going to have negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 49. The 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times negative 8 is negative 96. And this is all over negative 6. From here, you have negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 49 minus 96. Your 6 turns into 16. 9 would turn into 8. So 16 minus 9 is 7. 8 minus 4 is 4. And this is all over negative 6. You have a negative on that 7 and that 6, so they become positive. And you're just left with x is equal to 7 plus or minus the square root of 47 all over 6. That is negative, so your I should be in front of this. Oh, so let's do it the same color. This should have an I in front of it. This should have an I in front of it. Or this should be negative, sorry. It should be negative 47. So that negative comes out with the I. For your last question, number 15, you have negative 6x squared minus plus 36x minus 12 is equal to 0. For this one, I do not want to work with the 36 or the 12. I'd rather work with a much smaller number than those. Instead of taking the negative 6 as A, the 36 as B, and the negative 12 as C, you have a greatest common factor between all three of these terms, which is negative 6. So I would divide out that negative 6 first. That's going to give you negative 6 times x squared minus 6x. And then we're going to have a plus 2 is equal to 0. So from here, we would divide each side by the negative 6. They would cancel out on the left, and you'd just be left with x squared minus 6x plus 2 is equal to 0. So now you're working with an a of 1, a b of negative 6, and a c of 2. So if you plug this in, you're going to have x is equal to the opposite of negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 2 all over 2 times 1. Opposite of negative 6 is positive 6. Plus or minus the square root of 6 squared is 36. You got negative 4 times 1 times 2, which is negative 8. And this is all over 2. Simplify underneath the radical. That leaves you with 6 plus or minus the square root of 28 all over 2. Now that 28 does simplify to give you 4 and 7. The 4 is 2 and 2. So those 2's pair up, the 7 stays under. And you have x is equal to 6 plus or minus 2 square root 7 all over 2. This you can simplify, and the reason why is because the 6, the 2 square root 7, and the 2 are all divisible by 2. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. 2 square root 7 divided by 2 is just the square root of 7. And 2 divided by 2 is 1. So that gives you a final answer of 3 plus or minus the square root of 7.